At 2:13 a.m., my wife knocked on our bedroom door and asked me to drive her to the hospital to deliver a baby that wasn't ours. No lipstick on a collar, no secret hotel, just clinic emails, consent forms I never signed, and a best friend's husband who knew more about my wife's body than I did. I used to believe my life was ordinary in the best way possible. Ordinary meant safe. It meant dependable. It meant I could wake up every morning, roll over to kiss my wife's shoulder, and know with absolute certainty that everything I'd built would still be there tomorrow. 18 years with Marissa had created a rhythm I didn't question. Our 3 kids, 12, 9, and 6, were the center of that rhythm. Soccer practice, bedtime stories, family dinners where someone always complained about the vegetables. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. If you'd asked me back then if I was happy, I wouldn't have hesitated. Happiness wasn't fireworks and passion every second of the day. It was routine. The comfort of knowing that when I unlocked the front door after work, the sound of laughter and running feet would hit me before I even set my briefcase down. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice little cracks forming. A certain distance in Marissa's eyes when she was scrolling on her phone late at night, or the way she started skipping the glass of wine we used to share on Fridays. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed, problem. Just shifts. A new gravity pulling her attention elsewhere. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I walked into the kitchen to find her standing by the counter, staring at her phone like it held the answer to the universe. She didn't notice me at first. I leaned on the doorway, watching the way her lips moved slightly as if she were rehearsing words. "You okay?" I asked, breaking the silence. She startled, then forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." I wanted to believe that. I did. But a flicker of suspicion lodged itself in my chest. Not suspicion of another man, not yet. More like the suspicion that something inside her was shifting, that she was carrying a thought she didn't want me to see. The next morning was the same. Breakfast, backpacks, shoes by the door. Marissa kissed the kids on their foreheads, smiled at me faintly, and headed to work. Her wedding ring caught the sunlight as she grabbed her keys, and for some reason, it made me pause. I'd seen that ring every day for nearly 2 decades, but in that moment, it looked like a question instead of a promise. I brushed it off. After all, routine has a way of soothing doubts. We still had Sunday dinners with the kids shouting over each other, still had nights where we fell asleep tangled together, still had moments that felt exactly like they had years ago. It was enough to quiet the unease, most of the time. Then came the night I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was a Thursday, one of those evenings when the kids had run themselves ragged at soccer practice. They were asleep early, leaving the house unusually quiet. I suggested we watch a movie together, the way we used to before life got so busy. Marissa agreed, though her enthusiasm felt forced. Halfway through the film, I reached over and took her hand. Just a simple gesture. Her fingers tensed, then slipped free under the pretense of reaching for her water glass. She didn't take my hand again. It was a small thing, insignificant to anyone else. But to me, it was louder than a slammed door. When did my wife stop wanting to touch me? I didn't confront her that night. I didn't accuse or plead. I sat there with the glow of the TV flickering across her face, pretending to care about a storyline I couldn't follow because all I could think about was the distance between us. A distance that no longer felt accidental. Looking back, maybe that was the beginning of the end. Not the movie, not the glass of water, but the realization that routine had become camouflage. Beneath the surface, something was brewing, something that would take every ounce of certainty I'd ever had and set it on fire. And the cruelest part? I had no idea that Marissa's version of love, loyalty, and sacrifice would soon mean giving everything she had to someone else. I came home to the smell of basil and rain. The storm had just moved off the front range, leaving the sky bruised and the sidewalks glittering. Marissa stood at the stove, hair pinned up, the nape of her neck bare. That little crescent of skin always did something to me, 18 years and I still felt the pull. I slid my palms around her waist, kissed the spot below her ear, and felt her go still. Not startled. Braced. "Hey," she said lightly, as if the word had been practiced. "Hey." I breathed her in, tomato, laundry soap, the sweetness I'd learned by heart. You look good. She stepped out of my hands with a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Dinner in 10. Can we talk after the kids go down? Nothing kills appetite like a sentence that starts with "can we talk?" I nodded anyway, helped ferry plates to the table, asked the kids about homework and shin guards and who stole whose blue cup. Our family chatter rose and fell on its usual tides, but I could feel a second conversation thrumming beneath it, like bass too low to hear but impossible to ignore. After bedtime, she poured 2 glasses of wine and sat across from me at the dining table instead of next to me on the couch. Distance, chosen and measured. She smoothed her cardigan sleeves, then folded her hands like she was about to deliver a performance review. I've made a decision, she said. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Okay. Claire and Ryan have been trying for years. Her voice went soft, the way it does when she talks about scraped knees or charity drives. IVF, miscarriages, everything. They're exhausted. The doctors say her uterus is too scarred. They can't carry to term. I blinked. That's awful. I'll send flowers or I'm going to be their surrogate. The sentence landed like a plate dropped from the counter. No sound at first, just the expectation of it. Then the crash. You're what? I've thought about it for months, she said quickly, as if speed would soften the impact. I'm healthy, I've had easy pregnancies, and it would change their lives. It feels like the right thing. Months, I repeated. My voice sounded distant, like I was listening to myself from the next room. You've been thinking about this for months. Yes. A careful nod. With Claire. She hesitated. And Ryan. There was the crack inside the crack. My mouth tasted metallic. You talked to Ryan. We had to discuss logistics, she said too calmly. Legal stuff. Timing. Medical screening. You know. No, I said. I don't know because I wasn't part of those conversations. She took a breath that tried to be steady. I didn't want to burden you until I knew it was possible. You told another man, Claire's husband, before you told your own. It's not like that. What is it like? Her eyes flashed. Compassion. Maybe you've heard of it. I laughed then. Not because anything was funny, but because that was safer than the alternative. Compassion, I said, savoring the word the way a surgeon might inspect a contaminated instrument. Did you practice saying that with him too? You're being cruel. I'm being married. We stared at each other across the table we'd bought used and sanded together the summer our middle child was born. I remembered the dust in her eyelashes, the sawhorses in the driveway, the way we'd celebrated sanding the edges smooth by sneaking upstairs in the afternoon. Back then, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Back then, sex was a language we spoke without thinking. Now my wife was proposing to carry another man's child while I put our kids' lunches in brown bags and tried to pretend our bed didn't feel like a hotel room. Why did you go to him first? I asked quieter. Just tell me that. She swallowed. He's the one who had questions. You mean he was excited? Hopeful, she snapped. He was hopeful. He asked if I was sure. We talked about scheduling, hospital choice, insurance. You and Ryan talked about the hospital? We live here, she said helplessly. Where else would we do it? The image arrived uninvited, Ryan's palm on my wife's wrist as he thanked her, the intimate tilt of heads between people sharing a secret, the warm afterglow of being needed. I had always thought I was her refuge. I was beginning to learn I was simply her constant. How would this even work, Marissa? Kids, school, your job, doctor appointments? I've already checked my leave, she said. We'd manage like we always do. Manage, I echoed, hearing the contempt in my own voice and hating it. You decided to put our family through 9 months of emotional whiplash, and you call that managing. It's 9 months, Ethan. For a lifetime gift. Whose lifetime? Silence. The house ticked, baseboards cooling after the oven, a far-off drip in the mudroom sink. She pushed her wine glass away, the smudge of her lip gloss a faint pink crescent on the rim. I remembered that mouth on my throat, the way she used to pull me closer with a laugh that shook the mattress. I remembered the last time we tried to make love, Me tracing a line under her shirt, her body turning to stone, apology on her breath. Not tonight. I'm tired. Maybe this weekend. Desire had become a hallway with a locked door, and I'd taught myself to stop rattling the handle. Claire needs me, she said finally. I can do something no one else can. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me, I said. It means my wife belongs to someone else's crisis more than she belongs to her marriage. That isn't fair. It's not supposed to be fair. It's supposed to be us. Her eyes filled but didn't spill. She has always been disciplined that way, saving tears like money. I hoped you'd be proud of me. Proud. The words scraped my ribs from the inside. I would have been, I said, and it was almost true. If you'd come to me first. If we'd decided together. If it hadn't been Ryan's voice in your head warming you up for my reaction. He respected boundaries, she said softly. He asked about you. He said we should tell you before we go any further. We. I tasted the plural like a bruise. You keep saying we. Her shoulders squared like a boxer standing from the stool. I'm doing this, Ethan. I felt something tilt, an axis gone. The room looked the same, faded rug, the dent in the wall from that time a Lego bin got thrown, but the gravity was off. I nodded slowly, because I needed a movement that wasn't breaking dishes or begging. Then I need you to understand what you're choosing. I'm choosing kindness. You're choosing them. She flinched. You're twisting it. Maybe. I stood, palms flat on the table to steady myself. But here's a straighter version. You spoke about bodies and blood and timing with another man before you spoke to the man who sleeps next to you. You turned our marriage into a meeting you forgot to schedule. And if you carry his child under my roof, you will have turned our home into a waiting room for someone else's family. Her chin lifted, stubborn and beautiful. God help me, even angry, I wanted her. I wanted the curve of her spine under my hand, wanted to kiss her until some old door opened. The ache of wanting and not being wanted back was its own brand of humiliation. I need you with me on this, she said. You don't, I answered. You've already proved it. She looked past me toward the stairs, where our children were asleep and oblivious. When her gaze returned, something had cooled. Then I guess we'll figure it out as we go. Yeah, I said, throat tight. We always do. But the storm outside had nothing on the one settling into our house. And for the first time since we said I do, I knew routine wouldn't save us. It's strange how quickly a house can stop feeling like a home. Just days after Marissa's confession, the walls of our modest place outside Denver seemed to lean inward, heavy with everything unsaid. Our kids still bounced through the rooms, backpacks and sneakers in careless piles, but for me the air was different. Tense. Polluted. I tried at first to talk to her in calm tones. I wanted to believe reason might still live between us. One night after the kids were asleep, I sat on the edge of our bed and said quietly, Marissa, please, think about what this means. Not just for them. For us. For me. She closed the book in her lap but didn't look at me. I have thought about it. This is my body. My choice. And my chance to help someone I love. My jaw tightened. Your body. But our marriage. Our children. Our family. You don't get to pretend this decision doesn't bleed into all of us. Her voice hardened. So you want to control me? That's what this is. I shook my head. No. I want a partner. I want the woman I married to respect me enough to ask before volunteering to grow another man's baby under my roof. That word, baby, hung between us. I could see her flinch, but she held her ground. It's not Ryan's baby in the way you're saying. It's Claire's. It's theirs. Not yours. Not ours. I leaned forward, my hands clasped, trying to keep from shouting. Do you hear how insane this sounds? I will wake up every morning next to my wife, swollen with another man's child, and you think that won't poison everything between us? Her eyes narrowed. You make it sound dirty. Like sex. I almost laughed at the absurdity. No, sex would at least involve me. This is worse. Because I'm erased. Completely erased. For a moment, silence filled the room, punctuated only by the hum of the ceiling fan. I searched her face, hoping for a crack, a hint of doubt. But her expression was stubborn steel. "This is something noble," she whispered. "I thought you would admire me for it." Noble? That word turned in my chest like a blade. You want me to admire you for putting another man's name on the heartbeat inside you? For letting our kids watch their mother carry someone else's child while their father eats dinner across the table pretending everything's fine? Her lips pressed tight, her nostrils flaring. "You're twisting it." "No," I said softly. "You already did the twisting when you cut me out." That was when the warmth drained from our bedroom forever. We slept back to back that night, the air between us colder than any Colorado winter storm. The days that followed blurred together in arguments, whispers, slammed doors. Our children picked up on the strain immediately. At dinner, our 12-year-old Lucas asked, "Why don't you and Mom sit next to each other anymore?" Marissa froze, fork halfway to her mouth. I forced a smile and said, "Just trying something different." But Lucas's eyes told me he wasn't fooled. Kids see more than we want them to. At work, I caught myself staring at spreadsheets without processing a single number. My colleagues asked if I was okay. I lied, of course. "How do you explain that your wife wants to play savior with another man's DNA, and you're the villain for not applauding?" At night, lying in the dark, I tried to remember when our love had started to drift into this gulf. There had been attraction, hunger, sex that left us sweaty and laughing. There had been mornings when she would climb on top of me before the alarm, pressing her mouth against mine with that urgent, wordless need. Now, I couldn't even brush her hand without her pulling away as though I'd asked for too much. One Saturday afternoon, the tension snapped. She was folding laundry in the living room, and I stood in the doorway, watching her methodically stack shirts. "Marissa," I said, "if you go through with this, you're choosing them over me. Over us." She didn't stop folding. "Don't make it a competition." "It already is." My voice shook. "Because I can't live in a marriage where I'm second place to your best friend's desperation. I won't." Finally she looked up, eyes blazing. "Then maybe you're not the man I thought you were." That cut deep, deeper than I wanted to admit. I stepped closer, fists clenched at my sides. "And maybe you're not the woman I married. The woman I married would never have humiliated me like this." I didn't expect the first night of our separation to start with a calendar invite that didn't have my name on it. "If you loved me, you'd support me." The subject line glowed from Marissa's phone where she'd set it on the kitchen counter. "You never would have asked me to." Initial surrogate screening, the silence after that was volcanic, heavy enough to crack walls. Ryan. She turned away, picked up another shirt, and folded it with shaking hands. It felt indecent. I stood opening the bedroom door to find someone else, realizing something I hadn't dared say aloud until now. Colorado law says this was the breaking cooling off period. There would be no going back to normal. Our lawyer called it separation in place, that erased which sounds clinical until you realize it means in the kitchen that made everything feel your marriage exhales. Whatever we had built together was collapsing. She took the guest room, beam by beam. I kept the bed under the weight in the mattress that knew the shape of her body. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care that the rubble was crushing me alive. Neutral ground in the living room, polite weather talk in front of the kids. What we didn't write down was the real rule pulsing under all the others. This house would quietly convert itself into a staging area for another family's hope. The surrogacy moved forward like a train you can hear long before you see it. Marissa printed intake forms, pages and pages, medical history, birth dates, prior pregnancies. I'd seen that handwriting on permission slips and grocery lists. Now I watched it march across questions about uterine lining, embryo transfer windows, abstinence periods. The word sex appeared twice, wrapped in clinical phrasing that made my face go hot. Not because the clinic cared what I did, but because every box she checked made me more irrelevant. Our intimacy had once been messy, private, alive. Now it was reduced to a checkbox reminding her not to do the thing she had already stopped wanting with me. We told the kids a sanitized version. Mom is helping Auntie Claire by growing a baby for her. Our 12-year-old Lucas looked at me first, not her, as if there was a right answer stuck behind my teeth. Ivy, 9, asked if the baby would live here. Nora, 6, wanted to know if a borrowed baby still got a party. I kept my voice even, my face kind. Marissa's hand hovered near mine on the couch cushion and then landed on her own knee instead. The space between our fingers hummed like a live wire. The logistics multiplied. Prenatal vitamins lined up like soldiers next to the salt. A folder labeled Legal GC Agreement appeared on the desk we used to share. She snapped it shut when I walked by. I wasn't forbidden from reading it, I just wasn't invited. In the evenings, muffled voices drifted from the guest room as she zoomed with the agency psychologist. I learned to recognize the cadence of disclosure, pause, swallow, calculated softness, like she was building a case for the truest version of herself, and I didn't qualify as a witness. She started waking earlier, moving through the kitchen in an old college t-shirt that brushed her thighs. It wasn't for me anymore, and somehow that made it worse. I'd pour coffee and catch a glimpse of the future the clinic drew in brochures. Marissa glowing with borrowed purpose, Claire radiant with pending motherhood, Ryan floating at the edges wearing gratitude like cologne. The steam from my mug curled up and reminded me that heat rises and leaves the cold behind. The first appointment landed on a Thursday. I offered to take the kids to school so she wouldn't have to worry about timing. It felt like the decent thing, the civilized thing a man does when the person he loves decides to devote her body to someone else. She said thank you with a voice that remembered how to be tender, and I hated that it still worked on me. In the doorway she hesitated, as if debating a kiss to the cheek that might detonate us both, then left me with the smell of her shampoo and the click of the deadbolt. I told myself I wouldn't check my phone. I checked my phone. A photo popped up in the family thread Claire had made for the journey. Marissa in a paper gown, thumbs up, Ryan's reflection caught in the glass behind her as he took the picture. My thumb hovered over the heart reaction like a loaded trigger, and then I set the phone down so hard it rattled the salt shake. I went outside and tightened loose screws on the back gate until the muscles in my forearm shook. When she came home, she was flushed and chatty in the way I used to love after good news. Everything looks perfect, she said, setting down a stack of pamphlets about progesterone and timing windows. The counselor thinks I'm a great fit. They want one more blood panel and then we schedule the mock transfer. She stopped, reading my face, then softened. Ethan, I know this is hard. The old me would have reached for her waist. The new me leaned on the counter, palms flat, fingers digging into wood. You talked to Ryan? The beat. He drove me. Claire had a client call. I laughed without humor. Of course. I sat in back. She swallowed. He waited. It helped. I used to wait, I said, quieter than I meant to. Remember? Flu shots, ultrasounds, the time with Nora when the nurse couldn't find a vein? I waited. I remember, she whispered. Her eyes glistened, and for one reckless second I wanted to step into the pain with her, share it like bread. Then I pictured the photo again, Ryan's reflection, the paper gown, and the door slammed shut inside me. That night, she texted from the guest room, they want us celibate until transfer. The message wasn't a request or an apology, just a sterile boundary taped over a wound. I stared at the words until they blurred. It would have been funny if it didn't feel like a parody. Celibacy had already moved in months ago and was now asking rent. We tried to keep the machinery of life running. Homework, soccer, grocery lists. At dinner Lucas asked what a transfer was. Marissa explained with a diagram from a printout. She was good, gentle, precise, certain. I watched our children learn new vocabulary for a future where their mother's body would be a conduit for someone else's crib. Ivy asked if that meant Mom would be sick in the mornings again. Maybe a little, Marissa said. But it's a good kind of sick. Our daughter nodded solemnly like she'd been invited into a club. I swallowed hard enough to hear it. The next week brought counseling for spouses. I didn't go. I wasn't a spouse in this version, just a fixture. When the clinic called to include all stakeholders, I told them I was busy, and then spent the appointment time replacing the batteries in smoke detectors that had been chirping since winter. The house fell quiet afterward in a way that felt accusatory. At night, the guest room bathroom fan hummed and the water ran, and I thought about our old rituals. The way she'd turn to me in the dark and tuck one cold foot under my calf. The mornings when she'd slide astride me with sleep-heavy eyes and we'd chase the alarm clock together. Sex had been our grammar for a language we didn't need to translate. Now the house spoke a new dialect composed of clinic reminders and polite silence. I lay on my side of the bed and counted the seconds between pipes hissing and her cough. I stopped myself from getting up. On a gray Saturday, Claire invited herself over with muffins and a planner. The doorbell rang while I was fixing the wobbly kitchen chair. Marissa met her with that bright, high voltage I hadn't seen in a long time. "You're glowing," Claire said. "It's really happening." She squeezed my wife's hands, and I had to look away because there is a kind of intimacy that doesn't involve sex at all and still manages to strip you naked. I kept my mouth shut, my hands busy with wood glue. I listened to them debate clinic schedules and injection calendars on the other side of the island while the chair tightened under my grip. When Claire asked if we had space to store some supplies, just until transfer, I set the screwdriver down and said, too evenly, "We don't." Marissa flinched. Claire blinked at me like I'd misunderstood the script. "We'll keep it at our place," she said lightly, but the way she avoided my eyes told me we all knew a line had been marked in chalk across the tile. That night, after the kids were down, Marissa stood in the living room doorway wearing my old t-shirt again. The lamp haloed her, turning the cotton semi-transparent where it skimmed the curve of her hip. I could catalog the exact ache that rolled through me and still not touch it without shattering. "I scheduled the mock transfer," she said. "It's in 2 weeks." "Okay," I managed. "I don't want this to make you hate me." I looked at her and told the ugliest truth I had. "I don't know what I feel for you right now. Hate isn't it. It's worse. It's wanting you while I watch you give yourself away." She stared, breathing shallow, and for one impossible second I thought she might cross the room and crawl into my lap, bury her face in my neck, whisper "I'm sorry" against my skin until the apology became heat. Instead she nodded. "I'll keep the clinic stuff in the guest room," she said. "Out of sight." It was a tender concession that solved nothing. After she left, I sat alone with the chair I'd repaired, testing its new steadiness, thinking how stupid it is that what can be mended by pressure and glue, while people only creak quieter when you tighten them. Separation in place was supposed to be a temporary address. Surrogacy turned it into a waiting room with bad lighting and decent magazines. The forms kept arriving. The invite reminders stacked up. The house held its breath. And every night, 10 steps apart, we pretended we were 2 adults doing a compassionate thing, when really we were one burning and the other too luminous to notice. The first box arrived with our mail like a polite invasion. Brown cardboard, cheerful return address, Claire's handwriting in loopy blue across the top, nursery inspo, open. I left it on the entry bench like it might detonate. By evening it had migrated to the dining table, flaps open, spilling catalogs the way a suitcase spills secrets. Marissa stood over them with that bright, efficient focus I used to see when she planned our vacations. Tabs, sticky notes, a pen between her fingers she kept clicking. The sound felt like a metronome for my pulse. Claire came through the door without knocking, carrying a planner thick enough to stop a bullet. "Okay," she breathed, high on purpose. "I found a bassinet that converts to a co-sleeper. Safe, minimal, Scandinavian." She kissed Marissa's cheek like a victory stamp and spread her planner beside the catalogs. 2 women and a table, and somehow the room belonged to them now. I stood in the doorway holding a dish towel I didn't remember picking up. Ryan arrived with coffee and an app recommendation. He leaned over Marissa's shoulder, forearm brushing hers. I set up shared reminders: vitamins, hydration check, appointment countdown. "You'll get a ping every 2 hours. A ping every 2 hours, as if my house needed a heartbeat that wasn't one of ours. "Don't," I said too calm. "Not here." 3 faces pivoted. Marissa's features arranged themselves into diplomacy. "Ethan, it's just planning." "It's my dining table," I said. "And our kids do homework here." Ryan smiled like a patient teacher. "We can be quick." I looked at his hand on her chair back, the casual ownership of a man who thinks he's earned it by meaning well. Something bleak pressed against my ribs. "Be quick somewhere else." Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Marissa's eyes flashed, not fury, exactly, but a steady blue flame. "We'll clean up," she said, gathering papers. "We'll go." They did not go. They regrouped. That's how invasions work. They test the fence for weak boards and circle back with softer feet. On Wednesday the catalogs returned, tucked under the magnet shaped like a peach, a bright coffee ring in the corner as if even my cups were blessing their project. By Friday, a rocking chair appeared in the living room, half-assembled, Allen wrench glinting on the rug like a dropped earring. Ryan knelt beside it with the focused contentment of a man who thinks assembling furniture builds a future. Marissa sat cross-legged nearby in leggings and my old t-shirt, pointing to the instructions, hair in a loose knot that exposed the nape of her neck. I remembered kissing that exact spot after sex, my breath making her shiver. The memory hit so hard I had to grip the doorframe. "What is that doing here?" I asked. Ryan didn't look up. "We're trying to save time before tomorrow's appointment." I repeated. Marissa exhaled. "It's temporary. So is a tornado." I pick up the Allen wrench and set it on the mantel. "This is not a staging area. Take it to your house." Silence swollen with politeness. Claire, from the kitchen, said lightly, "We thought it would be easier here. Less lifting for Marissa." "She can lift a phone," I said, "to ask before turning my house into your showroom." Something brittle passed across Marissa's face. "Your house." The two words landed like china. I could have walked them back. I didn't. That night I ate standing up, the fork scraping the plate while the kids watched a movie. At the sink, Marissa passed behind me to rinse a glass. The brush of her hip along mine sent a shock through me that registered as anger because anger was simpler. She set the glass in the rack and stayed there, heat of her shoulder a few inches from my chest. "I'm not trying to erase you," she said, voice low. "I just need help." "Their help." "You had mine," I said. "You still do for our children. Not for this." "Compassion doesn't have borders," she said. "It does when it camps in my living room." The next morning, I woke to the smell of muffins and strategy. Claire's planner was back, now with color-coded stickers. Ryan had printed a floor plan of our first floor and was mapping flow. He was assigning future pathways to rooms I had painted with my own tired hands. Lucas hovered at the edge with his math book, waiting for a battlefield to be cleared so he could find an X. Ivy grabbed a catalog and traced a round crib with her finger like it was a carousel. Nora climbed into Claire's lap and asked, "Is it ours?" Claire kissed her hair and said, "It's everyone's." I felt something in me lean toward breaking. I put both palms on the table, leaned into the wood until it hummed. "Out," I said. 3 heads lifted. Marissa, Ethan. "Out," I repeated, steady as a level. "You don't plan your family in my house. You don't use my table, my air, my children's ears. You don't bring a chair you mean to rock someone else's baby in and set it where I used to hold my wife after the kids went to bed." Ryan squared his shoulders, polite smile gone. "We're not trying to disrespect you." "Then don't." Claire stood, gathering pages with shaky hands. "Of course, we can do this at our place." Marissa rose last. Her eyes shone like water trying not to spill. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "It needs to be hard," I said. "So I remember the difference between kindness and surrender." They filed out in an orderly line. Claire first, Ryan behind her carrying the rocking chair like contraband, Marissa at the rear with the planner pressed to her ribs. The door closed. The quiet that followed felt too loud. I set the Allen wrench on the table exactly where Ryan's hand had been. For an hour I cleaned. It wasn't tidying, it was triage. Crumbs, coffee rings, a single hair on the chair cushion that wasn't mine, evidence bagged and disposed of. I washed the catalogs off the fridge magnet with a damp towel and then washed the magnet like it could remember. When I finished, the room looked the same as last week, and nothing did. The kids trickled in. Lucas reclaimed the table like a soldier retaking a flag. Ivy asked if we could still have pancakes tomorrow, because pancakes mean home. Nora tugged my sleeve and said, "Why did you make Auntie Claire sad?" I knelt and told the truth I could live with. Grown-ups have to keep rooms safe. She nodded like it was weather and pressed her forehead to mine. That night, the house pulsed with absence. I lay in bed and listened to Marissa moving in the guest room. Drawers, the soft rip of tape, the whisper of paper. I pictured her packing the planner away and hating me for making her do it. I pictured her missing me. I pictured Ryan's name lighting her phone and wanted to throw mine through the window. Wanting and refusing are cousins. Both kept me awake. Around midnight, She paused in the doorway to our bedroom, just a shadow with a heartbeat. "They won't come here anymore," she said. "Good," I answered, and it didn't feel good at all. She edged inside the threshold like a tide testing shore. "You could have asked. You didn't have to humiliate me." I asked 100 silent times. "You didn't hear any of them. Because you stopped speaking. Because you started speaking for us without me." She made a small sound, not a sob, something raw. For a breath I thought she might cross the carpet, climb onto the bed, and undo everything with the shape of her body against mine, the way we used to solve unsolvable fights. Heat first, sense later. Sex is the old truce. She didn't. She left, and the hallway swallowed her. I slept badly and woke with a plan I didn't know I was making until it was already made. I would defend the borders of what remained. The kitchen. The table. The ordinary routines that keep children from slipping into adult storms. If compassion meant letting strangers dictate the map of my home, then I would be inhospitable. By noon, a new message chimed on my phone. Mock transfer confirmed. Spouse counseling optional. Optional. I stared until the letters doubled and steadied. The house was clean. The table was clear. In the silence, I finally understood what had broken me the most. Not the catalogs or the chair, but the fact that when Marissa looked at our rooms, she saw space. When I looked, I saw the life we'd already built. And now I was the only one guarding it. The test turned positive on a Tuesday I pretended was any other Tuesday. Not our test, never ours, but a blood draw at the clinic that came back with numbers everyone said were beautiful. Claire texted a string of sunbursts and baby bottles. Ryan added a screenshot of the beta like it was a stock he'd picked that finally soared. Marissa forwarded the thread to me with nothing but a single blue heart. I stared until the icon blurred and then put my phone face down on the counter like you do with something that's still hot. The house learned the new vocabulary fast. Progesterone. Beta. Dating scan. I learned to tell when nausea was coming by the way she pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose, by the way her shoulders lifted as if bracing for a wave. She moved slower on the stairs. She slept earlier and woke earlier, shuffling through the kitchen in my old t-shirt, hand absent-mindedly resting low on a body that once curved toward mine like a habit. My body noticed before my brain did. Hunger has a memory. Desire flickered in me at the worst times. At the sink when her hem lifted, in the hallway when her perfume ghosted after her. And then the second wave, anger, cold and clarifying. Wanting didn't earn me a place at this table anymore, not even as a witness. The injections left bruises high on her hips, quarter moons in purple and yellow. One night she came to the doorway holding a prepped syringe, her voice soft in that careful way you use with skittish animals. "Can you, just tonight, switch sides? I can't reach." I didn't look up from the math worksheet I'd been checking with Lucas. "Ask Ryan," I said. "Ask Claire." Ethan. My name held 19 different years. "This isn't my pregnancy," I said, without heat. "You chose your team." Her mouth parted like she wanted to throw the syringe. Instead she pivoted and shut the guest room door with a click so small it felt like a pin pressed into my thumb. I walked my son through systems of equations until the ache in my chest dulled into something I could file. By 6 weeks there was a heartbeat, a grainy flicker on a dark circle that made the ultrasound tech say, "There," as if pointing to a star. Marissa texted me the clip. I watched it on mute at my desk at work, blinds closed, lights off, the soundless pulse making my own chest thud in a rhythm that felt like betrayal. When I got home, the girls were drawing hearts on construction paper for a class project. Ivy asked, "Can we hear the baby?" I said, "Ask Mom." I could hear Marissa on speaker in the guest room, her voice fielding congratulations from Claire's family like a newscaster on a happy beat. I put 2 heart stickers on Ivy's wrist and told Nora she could have the glitter glue if she promised not to decorate the dog. Marissa started needing help with everything and nothing. The full laundry basket. The jar that wouldn't open. A ride to the appointment on the morning the minivan wouldn't start. Each time the request came wrapped in soft paper, like maybe packaging could turn obligation into love. Each time I refused. Not unkind, just precise. Ask Claire. Ryan can drive you. There's rideshare. My no became a clean instrument, honed until it sliced without leaving ragged edges. Silence was the sheath. Her parents came over one Sunday with a casserole and an agenda. They pulled me aside in the driveway like a pair of small, polite cops. Her mother's eyes shone the way they did in church when she said words like grace. "She's exhausted, Ethan. This is hard on a woman's body." Her father added, "Whatever your feelings about all this, she's still your wife." "She moved into the guest room," I said. "She moved her life too." "That doesn't mean she doesn't need you," her mother whispered. "Be the bigger person." I looked at the casserole cooling between us. It smelled like nutmeg and good intentions. "I'm being the father," I said. "That's the biggest person in this house." I took the dish, thanked them, and went inside to set the table for 4 because Marissa had an early night and because I needed something I could control, like forks pointing the same way. I threw myself into the kids' lives with the fervor of a man choosing the winning side of a war he never wanted. I made color-coded calendars and taped them inside a cabinet. I learned the exact minutes it takes to make pancakes and still catch the first bell. I read aloud until my voice scraped. I stood at the curb in the dark and cold for soccer drop-off, hands in pockets, breath white, feeling more alive as a father than I had felt as a husband in months. The house began to believe me. It started to smell like garlic and shampoo and crayons again, not like antiseptic hope. At the end of the first trimester, Claire and Ryan hosted a tiny celebration at their place. I was invited in the way a neighbor is invited when a tree falls near the property line. I didn't go. Marissa came home with the kind of glow you can't fake, one hand unconsciously curved low across her belly, a party favor tucked into her purse, tiny socks folded to look like cupcakes. She found me at the sink and stood there, not speaking, while I rinsed the pan. When I shut off the water, the quiet roared. "You won't even look," she said. I looked. At her face, at the soft crescent of swelling that didn't belong to us, at the bruises fading on her hips beneath the hem of my shirt. My body answered before my mouth did, heat and shame one mixed thing. "I am looking," I said. "That's the problem." She set the socks on the counter like a dare. "This is a good thing I'm doing." "It might be," I said. "But it's not good to me. You're punishing me." "I'm choosing where my compassion lives," I said. "It lives with our kids." She made a sound halfway to a laugh. "And what am I to them now? A cautionary tale?" "You're their mother," I said. "That's why this hurts." The night cracked open at 2:13 a.m. with 3 soft knocks on my door. The kind you use when you don't want to wake the children, the kind you use when you're afraid of the answer. I was already awake. Habit now, nerves trained to stand guard in the hours when the house forgets how to breathe. I opened the door and there she was in the hallway light, hair dark with sweat, one arm bracing the wall above the family photos. "My water," she whispered. "Ethan, my water broke." The floor between us held a small, shining proof. It had no smell and all the gravity in the world. A memory arrived without permission. The first time, years ago, a gush like a miracle and my hands on her back, my voice saying we're okay, we're okay. I shut the door on that memory the way you shut a window against a storm. "Call Claire," I said. She swallowed. "I already texted." No answer. "Ryan too." "Then call 911. "Ethan, please." My name bent in the middle. Everything in me leaned toward yes. The old choreography flickered in my muscles. Grab the bag, find the car keys, help her downstairs, time the contractions, crack a joke we'd laugh at later. The reflex to save was still there, as stupid and noble as it's always been. I put my hand on the door jamb to keep from moving. "This isn't my emergency," I said. "Call 911. Her mouth opened, closed. A contraction took her like a grip from the inside. She folded to her knees, one hand pressed low, teeth bared. I stood with my breath held until the wave let her go. She stared at the puddle widening on the hardwood, then at me, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. History versus a line she had drawn herself. She fumbled the phone, fingers shaking, and dialed. While she spoke to the dispatcher, I walked down the hall and looked in on the kids. Lucas was starfished in sleep, mouth open, the way he used to as a toddler. Ivy had kicked her blanket to the floor, I covered her and she rolled toward the wall, fists tucked under her chin like a boxer resting. Nora had managed to turn sideways so her feet pressed against the headboard, her nightlight throwing a small kingdom of yellow across her face. It steadied me in a way that felt like betrayal of another kind. The siren cut the quiet in a clean diagonal. Red strobes washed our street, woke a dog, lit up the photos on our wall so our younger selves flashed as if calling from underwater. The paramedics moved with that purposeful calm that says everything and nothing is an emergency. They stepped around the puddle like it was just water on a floor, not the moment a choice becomes a life. "You coming with us, sir?" one asked, glancing at my face, at our bedroom, at the ring I still wore out of habit. I shook my head. "She has people," I said. "Call the intended parents." One of them must have seen something sharp flick across my expression, because he gave me the professional kindness they keep for the truly lost. "We'll take good care of her." They did. They asked her name and date of birth and how far along and did the math I'd been refusing to do. "Early, too early." She winced and breathed and answered. When they rolled her toward the door, the gurney's wheels clicked over the threshold, the sound of leaving formalized into a rhythm. She turned her face toward me, eyes wide and wet. Not a word. Not forgive me or help or don't. Just a look that held 19 years and a hallway full of silence. I stepped back. My hip hit the console table where we keep spare keys and a bowl of mail. A set of car keys skated, wobbled, and settled. I didn't pick them up. When the door closed, the house came apart and then reassembled as if hiding the evidence from itself. I heard the siren fade toward the hospital we used to know by heart. I stood for a long time with my palm on the cool place the gurney wheel had touched, as if heat could travel backward. Then I went to the kitchen and turned on the kettle because hands need work when a heart's job is to hold still. Steam shook the window. On the counter, a folded sheet of ultrasound photos leaned against the fruit bowl, dated last week, a profile like a comma mid-sentence. They had left them here earlier that day after an appointment, laughing about hiccups and placentas and some inside joke about a nurse who wore bee earrings. I wanted to take the strip in both hands and pull until the paper screamed. Instead I slid it into a drawer and closed the drawer like a mouth. The floor around our bedroom doorway shone in the hall light. I got a towel. I knelt. Warmth soaked the cotton. Salt climbed my throat. There was a time my knees had pressed this floor because we were kissing here, urgent and half-dressed, laughing when the dog whined at the wrong moment, sex the way we solved impossible puzzles. Now my knees sank because there was a truth on the tiles and I was the only one left to clean it. My phone buzzed against the counter. Unknown number, this is St. Joseph's. Marissa, last name, is en route. Are you her spouse? The word felt like a joke the universe forgot to take back. I typed, husband. Not attending. Cunty Claire, last name, number. I erased the phone number twice before I remembered it correctly. The nurse wrote back thanks and a smile I didn't need. I made coffee I couldn't drink and stood at the sink listening to the house hum. The question came, as I knew it would, am I a monster? The answer arrived slower, I am a boundary. Monsters break. Boundaries hold. The difference is thinner at 3 a.m. than in daylight. At 3:17 my phone lit again. Claire, we're on our way. Are you with her? I wrote no and nothing else. A bubble appeared and disappeared. She sent a heart and a prayer and a promise to keep me updated I didn't ask for. I turned the phone face down. Outside, a neighbor's bathroom light went on and off. The street settled back into the kind of dark that holds your breath for you. I rinsed the towel and hung it over a chair, then set out bowls and spoons like a man preparing for a morning that would come whether or not a baby breathed. The children woke early the way children do when the air has changed. Lucas padded into the kitchen, brows drawn, eyes scanning for a new arrangement of facts. Where's Mom? Hospital, I said, pouring cereal. The baby's coming. He looked at me like a verdict might be written on my face. Are we going? Not yet, I said. You've got school. He didn't argue. He just nodded like a boy who'd had to grow an extra year overnight. Ivy shuffled in with a blanket trailing, hair a bright nest, voice small. Is Auntie Claire there? She will be. Is the baby okay? I don't know, I said, because lying is another way to leave and I'd already done enough of that for one night. Nora came last, thumb in her mouth, solemn with the kind of solemn only small children manage. "Did the water break the house?" she asked. I picked her up and kissed her forehead and told her the house was fine, that water breaks so babies can swim out. The metaphors we give our children are small boats. I hoped this one would float until afternoon. When the kids were dressed and backpacks ready, I stood at the sink with my phone buzzing on the counter and stared at it like it was the answer to a question I refused to say. Text stacked. Claire, the nurse, a number I recognized as Ryan's and didn't open. I put the phone in a drawer next to the ultrasound strip and closed it again. Driving to school, the mountains were the color of bruises healing. Traffic lights blinked their patient code. The world went on telling us when to stop and go. At the curb, I kissed the girls and squeezed Lucas's shoulder. "Dad." "Yeah. Are you okay?" "Ask me tomorrow," I said, and he nodded like that was a real answer. Back home, the house felt like the backstage of a play I'd refused to join. I made the beds. I picked up a sock. I sat on the edge of what used to be ours and listened to the fan whir in the guest room down the hall, the place where she had learned how to sleep without me. I thought about wheels and thresholds and the way she had looked back. I thought about how every birth is a door, and how some doors you guard without going through. When the message finally came, "She's in a room. Early. They're trying to stop it," I didn't answer. I folded my hands, unsteady but together, and waited for the next sound in a house that had already heard too much, the knock that would ask for more of me than I knew how to give, or the quiet that meant I'd kept exactly what I'd promised, nothing at all. The doorbell didn't ring so much as wince. When I opened it, Marissa stood there with hospital bracelets biting her wrist and a bundle pressed to her chest like contraband. Ryan hovered behind her with a plastic tote of supplies, formula, tiny diapers, a humming monitor that already sounded like insomnia. He looked 12 years older than last week. "Claire's still in," he said, voice shredded. "Complications. They think it's under control, but the baby can't stay there. They want room in. Could she, just for a few nights?" A few nights. The most dangerous phrase in English. I stepped back without answering. Marissa slid past me into the hallway, eyes fever-bright, the bundle stirring. The baby hiccuped, then let out a noise like a winded bird. Ryan set the tote on the dining chair I'd reclaimed yesterday with soap and stubbornness. "We'll figure it out," he said, like a promise to the air. He looked at me then, searching for something, permission, gratitude, a fight. I gave him none. He squeezed Marissa's shoulder, whispered, "Call me," and left my house like a man backing away from a cliff. A stranger's baby slept in my home that afternoon while my daughters colored animals that didn't exist and my son retreated to math. The monitor ticked. The guest room glowed with that low afternoon light that makes everything look like it belongs to someone kinder. Marissa moved like a person built from paper and thread. She'd been crying. Her voice rasped when she asked where the extra sheets were. I pointed. When she asked if I could hold the door while she wrangled the bassinet through, I put my foot against the jamb and looked at my hands so they wouldn't betray me. By dinner, the girls knew. Ivy whispered, "He's so tiny," as if the baby could be broken by volume. Nora asked if he could stay forever because our house needed a baby again. Lucas said nothing, jaw tight, eyes hard, the way he looks at problems with no variables left. "I'll take night duty," Marissa said, though no one had offered relief. "It's only until Claire's released." "Then do it in your room," I said. "Keep the door mostly closed." She nodded, a quick acceptance that hurt worse than a fight. She warmed a bottle on a timer that beeped like a smoke alarm, then sat on the edge of the guest bed and fed him with her shoulders bowed, the way you make yourself smaller so a small thing has the whole world. The monitor clicked. The baby sighed. The house retuned itself to a new instrument and called it Mercy. At 2 a.m., the Mercy screamed. It wasn't a big sound, not compared to our kids at that age, but it sliced because it didn't belong to us. The monitor chirped, then wailed its artificial terror. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling while a memory unspooled. Marissa, bare and milk-sweet, easing a newborn to her breast, my hand on her thigh, the afterglow of sex making the night feel solvable. Now I heard the bottle warmer chirp again and counted the seconds between her shushing and the next cry. At 2:27, footsteps in the hall. She paused by my door, almost knocked, didn't. The world held its breath. I let it. The next morning she moved like a lighthouse in fog, steady, pale, designed to keep other people from breaking. Her hair was braided badly. She never braided badly. "Could you," she began, then swallowed it. "Never mind." She carried the baby to the couch and did skin to skin under my old college t-shirt, the hem lifted to bear the soft rise of her stomach, the valley of her sternum. My body was an idiot. It remembered sex as if sex were a door we could still open. I turned away and scrubbed the stovetop that wasn't dirty. By noon, there were lists on the counter: ounces, times, wet diapers. Ryan texted updates from Claire's floor: oxygen better, fever down, maybe 2 more days. He added heart emojis like he owed them to the situation. Marissa nodded at the phone like prayer. When the baby slept, she dozed upright, mouth slack, one hand still on the bassinet. The moment the eyes fluttered, she woke fully, ready to offer what she didn't have. "Ethan," she said mid-afternoon, "could you pick up the prescription?" His reflux. She held out a paper like a truce flag. "Ask Ryan," I said. "Or delivery. This is faster." "Faster is not my problem." She flinched. "He's not a problem. To you." "To them," she said, a plea and a defense in one. "To me he's a task. I can do tasks." My laugh came out wrong. You can do tasks in any house you want. This one has limits. Another night arrived with its teeth out. The baby fussed for hours, the rubbery squeak of the nipple against his gums like a distress signal no one else could hear. At one point the monitor shrieked long enough that I got out of bed on reflex and stood outside the guest room door with my hand lifted to knock. Through the crack I saw her bent over the bassinet, t-shirt rucked up, one breast loose in the dark as she tried to hand express a few drops to soothe him because the bottle wasn't settling right. The sight struck like memory and punishment at once. I backed away on numb feet and lay awake until the birds. On the third day, the girls left sticky notes on the guest door: hearts, stars, a badly drawn baby with Nora's handwriting underneath, no monsters. Lucas found me in the garage pretending to look for a wrench I didn't need. "How long?" he asked. "Until Claire comes home." He nodded. "What if she doesn't get better fast?" Then Ryan steps up. He looked at me the way boys look at men when they're taking notes. "You really won't help?" "I am helping," I said. "I'm keeping this house from breaking." He took that like a math answer. True, maybe, but not the one he wanted. That afternoon I found an envelope in the mail stack with our names, the clinic return address crisp and ordinary. Inside was an insurance EOB and a photocopy of a consent page with my signature. Only the curve of the R in my last name was wrong. It hooked left instead of right. I stood still long enough to hear my pulse thud inside my teeth. I slid the paper into the file I had started without admitting I'd started one. Facts are a kind of tenderness too, if you aim them carefully. Ryan came that evening, eyes purpled by fear and fluorescent light. He showered gratitude over the room like confetti. Marissa shook her head, embarrassed by thanks. He reached for the bassinet and his hands trembled. The baby opened his mouth and made that small bird sound again, then hiccuped, then settled. Ryan exhaled something like a sob into his palm. I watched a man try to be a father in a house where the father had decided fathering was a finite resource. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel cruel. I felt accurate. 2 more days, Ryan said after a call with the nurse. Maybe 1. Good, I said because it was. That night, the baby finally slept a long stretch. The house exhaled with him. I made tea and stood in the doorway to the guest room because standing there cost less than stepping closer. Marissa was slumped on the edge of the bed, chin to chest, her hands still on the bassinet rim as if she feared the baby might roll away and carry her with him. In sleep she looked like the girl I married, the woman I wanted, the ship I wouldn't board again. I whispered her name once, just to hear how it sounded in a room I didn't enter, and went back to my own. Morning brought a text from Claire's phone with a photo of her pale but upright, for-taped neat, smile pinned on. Tomorrow the caption read. Balloons and prayers clustered beneath it. Marissa cried then, quiet and relieved in a way that made my skin ache. She kissed the baby's forehead and whispered promises that did not include me. Before noon I went through the house and put everything back where it belonged: chair angles, remote on the table, catalog magnetized under the grocery list. I changed the dead bulb over the sink. I packed the girls' lunches and wrote a bad joke on Lucas's napkin because that is the only way he lets me touch his day. The baby breathed, soft and indifferent. I did not pick him up. When Ryan came to take him that evening, he tried to hug me. I stepped back so the gesture fell to the floor and broke without sound. At the door he said, "We couldn't have done this without you." I didn't correct him. The house closed around the quiet he left. In the guest room, a single sock the size of a mouse slept on the carpet. I stared at it, at the imprint the bassinet had left on the rug, at the outline of a life that would not be mine. Then I picked up the sock with 2 fingers and dropped it into the tote of supplies nobody would claim. On the table, my file sat like a future. I opened it. I set the forged R on top. If I wouldn't carry their baby, I would carry the weight of paper. It was lighter and it cut deeper. The lie fit inside a single letter. Not even a word, just the wrong hook on the R in my last name. I traced that curve with my finger at our kitchen table, the photocopy slick under my thumb, and felt something in me harden to purpose. By the time we stood in Division 14, the R was Exhibit C, and the clerk's sticker made it official. Our marriage hadn't been broken by sex or shouting, but by a pen that turned left instead of right. Courthouses smell like varnish and nerves. We sat at separate tables under fluorescent honesty. Marissa wore a navy dress, hair twisted up, the same pearl studs she'd worn to Lucas's kindergarten play. The months since delivery clung to her, the faint swell that lingers, the careful way she sat. Seeing it tugged at a place in me I resented, the memory of her body opening, the memory of being invited there. My hands knew exactly where to rest on her hips, my mind held them still on the edge of counsel's table. My lawyer, Alvarez, slid a binder toward me. Tabs like ribs. "We'll stay clean," she murmured. "No character assassination. Money. Consent. Best interests of the children. That's it." Across the aisle, Marissa's attorney arranged papers with the precision of someone who knows the story sounds holy until money walks in. Behind them, Ryan and Claire sat side by side like polite ghosts. He kept his gaze on the floor. She clutched a water bottle and didn't drink. The judge read the caption, then our names, then the docket number that had replaced the number of our address in my head. We swore to tell the truth. My voice didn't shake. Hers did barely. "Ms. Last name," the judge began, "your petition and response mention significant expenditures related to a third-party reproduction arrangement. I'll hear your explanation." Marissa's eyes found mine for a blinding heartbeat and then fled. "Claire and Ryan struggled for years," she said, voice soft, the same tone she used to use when Ivy skinned her knee. I could help. I believed, I still believe, it was the compassionate choice. She folded her hands to keep them from trembling. Ethan didn't agree. He made that clear. Alvarez stood. "No one argues about compassion, Your Honor. We're here because my client never consented, and because Ms. Last name used joint funds and his forged signature to advance that choice." The judge's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Forged?" "Exhibit C," Alvarez said, sliding the copy of the consent page into the light. "Compare the SIG to Mr. Last name, S driver's license. The curve of the R hooks left here. It has never done so in 20 years of signatures." She laid down bank statements and agency invoices like cards. $14,800 to the agency from a joint account, $2,600 in pharmacy charges, $900 in screening labs billed to a family credit card, none authorized by Mr. Last name. We are not arguing morality. We are arguing theft. Marissa's attorney objected to the word. Sustained, noted. Theft became misappropriation, and somehow that sounded worse. They asked me to speak. The microphone smelled metallic and everyone waited for my insides. I said the lines I had practiced at 3 a.m. when the house hummed like a held breath. "I didn't consent," I said. "Not to the pregnancy, not to my name on medical forms, not to our joint money funding it. I wasn't asked about counseling or timing. I wasn't in the room. Another man was. I didn't look at Ryan. She told me compassion doesn't have borders. Mine does. They're named Lucas, Ivy, and Nora. Marissa's attorney stood. Mr. Last name, is it true you refused to help your wife when she went into labor? That you told her to call 911 while she was in your hallway? Alvarez didn't object. She told me to let that one land and not flinch. Yes, I said. The word was a brick I set down without apology. We were already legally separated. The intended parents were available. Your children were home, he pressed. Yes. And what lesson did you teach them? About marriage, about mercy? That boundaries mean something, I said. Even when they hurt. I heard my voice and hated how calm it sounded. Calm can look like cruelty from the wrong angle. They put Marissa back on. Her lawyer reframed everything as a spreadsheet of good deeds, medical necessity, agency policies, the timing of Claire's complications, the fact that the baby existed and therefore all roads before must be blessed in retrospect. When he ran out of pages, he shifted to me. Ethan withdrew affection months before this, Your Honor. He weaponized silence. He used sex like a ration card. He crawled up my neck. There it was, the thing you never want named in public. I thought about how many nights I had wanted and refused, how many times I'd laid a palm against my own chest to keep from crossing a hallway. Sex wasn't a weapon, I said. It was a language we stopped speaking at the same time. The judge took notes in patient, inexorable strokes. Then she stacked her papers and looked at us the way you look at a burned pan, calculating what might still be salvaged. Here is what the court finds, she said. Her voice was level and the air conditioned itself around each word. Colorado is a no-fault state. I am not in the business of blessing or damning motives. I am in the business of money and children. On money, Miss, last name, you used community funds for a purpose your spouse expressly opposed, and you affixed his name to at least one consent form without his permission. That is not compassion. That is misconduct. There will be no spousal maintenance. You will reimburse half of the agency and medical charges paid from the joint accounts on a schedule we will set. Marissa closed her eyes. The sound that left her throat was small and older than language. On children, the judge continued, I have reviewed the temporary orders, the school records, and the parties' affidavits. Mr. Last name has been the primary parent during the separation period. The stability of the home matters, particularly given the upheaval. Primary physical custody to Mr. Last name, joint legal decision-making, a parenting plan with substantial time to Ms. Last name, as laid out in the proposed week-on/weekend plus midweek schedule. She looked at Marissa and gentled without softening. You may be an excellent mother and still have made choices that destabilized your children's world. Your pen doesn't get to outrun their best interests. Alvarez squeezed my elbow under the table. It was the most physical contact I'd had in days that didn't feel like fighting unseen weather. Marissa's attorney asked for a recess. Denied. The judge signed the orders with a pen that knew which way the R should curve and handed them to the clerk. The click of the stamp was a gavel in miniature. We stood. Paper rustled like wings stalled midair. Ryan reached for Marissa's hand. She let him, then pulled away to wipe her face. Claire mouthed sorry at me, and for the first time since this began I believed her. Alvarez packed the binder like a surgeon putting away instruments. Outside the courtroom, the hallway looked like a school built for people who forgot how to be young. We hovered in our separate weather systems. Marissa stepped closer and I felt my body betray me by remembering her mouth, the notch above her collarbone, the way she'd once pulled me back to bed by just saying my name. For one atom of a second, I wanted to put my palm on the back of her neck and tell her I knew how to comfort this exact kind of crying. Then the orders in my hand got heavier. You got what you wanted, she said, not accusing, not absolving. Just reporting a fact with salt on it. No, I said. I got what I could live with. She nodded as if that were worse. They'll say you punished me. They can say what they want, I answered. I didn't have to punish you. What does that mean? It means you did the work for me. She flinched like I'd struck her and then did the thing that always used to undo me, took a small, unconscious step closer. The heat between us rose like an old song through a bad speaker. I stepped back into the cool of the orders and the future they contained. Alvarez touched my shoulder. "Let's file the signed copies." On the sidewalk, Denver's sun made the paper glow in my hands. I texted Lucas, "Pasta tonight? Tell your sisters." 3 dots appeared. "This. Garlic bread?" I wrote always and stared at the word until it blurred. People talk about revenge like it's an act. Sometimes it's just gravity. You stop catching what someone throws. You let it hit the floor. In the end, I didn't destroy her. I only refused to cushion the fall. The orders came home in a manila envelope that made the kitchen look official. I slid them into the drawer with batteries and rubber bands, the place where we keep things that keep other things running. Primary custody to me. Reimbursement on a schedule. No alimony. Words tidy enough to pass for mercy. Marissa moved in with her parents the following week. She took the quilt from the guest room and the plant that only ever thrived on her windowsill. Her mother's SUV idled at the curb while the girls stood on the porch with backpacks and brave faces. Lucas hugged her without looking at me. Ivy asked if she could have the nightlight back in our room now that the guest room was just a room again. Nora held up a drawing of a house with too many windows and said, "This one has extra eyes so it can see where everyone goes." Marissa tucked the paper into her bag like scripture and kissed them all in order of age, as if that could keep structure from collapsing. Claire's baby was still small enough to disappear inside a blanket. Complications take their time. On the days Marissa wasn't at work, she spent hours at Claire's, learning the language of this particular child. The hiccup that meant reflux, the gasp that meant nothing, the red-faced quiver that meant the bottle was 2 degrees wrong. She texted photos sometimes, tiny socks, a yawn that looked like an apology, a forehead she kissed with a tenderness that used to be mine. She never texted them to me directly, they leaked into family threads or arrived via Ivy's iPad. I scrolled past them like any stranger, and it still felt like betrayal when my chest answered. At home, the air changed. It wasn't joy is noisy, but something better than dread. Quiet. Routines landed with a thud and then made sense. The girls started sleeping through again. Lucas stopped flinching when the doorbell rang. I taped a fresh calendar inside a cabinet and put the court schedule into boxes that made sense to the children. Mom's Sunday through Tuesday dinner, Dad's after-school pickups, Nora's library day. We moved like a family that had learned to breathe under new laws. It would be cleaner to say I never thought of sex. That the ache evaporated when the stamp dried. It didn't. My body kept its own calendar. On handoff nights, when Marissa arrived smelling like lavender and road dust, my pulse still did the old, stupid sprint. She would stoop to tie a shoe, t-shirt lifting to show an inch of back I knew by heart, and heat would rise like a reflex I didn't vote for. I learned to stand with my hip against the counter and think about grocery lists until my hands remembered themselves. Wanting isn't the same as choosing. Choosing is quieter. She apologized twice in the first month. Once on the porch after bedtime, voice tight as piano wire. "I didn't mean to erase you." The second time over text, 3 plain sentences with no punctuation, like she'd poured them out too quickly to aim. I answered both the same way, with logistics. "The girls' soccer fees are due Friday. Lucas needs poster board." I wasn't punishing her. I was speaking the only language we still shared that didn't lie. The house loosened its shoulders. I fixed the door jamb the gurney had nicked and oiled the hinge that had complained for a year. The rocking chair that never belonged was replaced by a bookshelf the girls and I built one Saturday, crooked by half a whisper, perfect because of it. Sunday mornings, I made pancakes so precisely timed the dog learned when to sit for a scrap. In the quiet stretches, grief would float up, not like a wave anymore, more like a song you'd forgotten was yours. I'd let it play to the end without skipping. That felt like victory. One afternoon I took the kids to the park by the creek, the one with the metal slide hot enough to brand memory into skin. We brought sandwiches and a soccer ball. Ivy taught Nora a chant she swore made wishes work. Lucas lay in the grass and narrated clouds the way he used to when he was 6, and I was invincible. On the far bench, a couple kissed like teenagers, all hands and laughter. For a second I hated them for having something I'd spent years mistaking for permanence. Then Nora kicked the ball square into my shin and I remembered my job was to be here. Co-parenting with Marissa turned into a series of exchanges that felt like customs checkpoints. We smiled. We handed over the passports of lunchboxes and homework and sleepover permission slips. We did not search each other's luggage. On a Thursday she arrived with a new haircut and the kind of exhaustion you can't hide with mascara. The girls flew into her arms. She looked at me over their heads with a question I couldn't translate. "You look good," she said. "You look like you're sleeping." I shrugged. "Sometimes." After they left, I stood in the doorway and listened to the quiet like it might confess something. It didn't. Claire recovered slowly. Ryan got better at holding his son. They invited us, me and the kids, to a small gathering to say thank you. I sent a gift instead, practical and boring, purchased online at midnight, a better monitor with fewer false alarms. Marissa texted a photo from the party of Claire holding the baby, cheeks wet, Ryan's hands steady on her back. In the background, a corner of my old college t-shirt, Marissa's favorite, ghosted the edge of the frame. I put the phone face down and went to pack lunches. Slicing apples felt more useful. The first time I took the kids to Marissa's parents' house after everything, her mother hugged me too long at the door. "You did right by them," she whispered into my shoulder, meaning the children, meaning maybe all of us. Her father shook my hand like it was a truce he believed in. Marissa's room there looked like high school had been waiting. A corkboard, a few faded pictures, a new crib wedged where a desk might have been for the nights she still helped at Claire's. I stood in the hallway and tried not to look like a man measuring loss with his eyes. At night, I sometimes woke to the phantom sound of the old monitor we no longer owned. A chirp, a whine, a breath caught and released. The house would be still. The dog would snore. My chest would ache in a way that felt less like pain and more like weather, pressure changing, a front moving through. I'd get up and check the kids anyway, the way muscle memory orders you to. Lucas would be the shape of a question mark. Ivy would have one sock off like always. Nora would be sideways, head at the footboard, sure of her own map. I'd climb back into bed and feel the exact weight of what I'd kept. People asked gently if I was dating. The word felt like a dare. "Not yet," I'd say and mean it. There's a strange intimacy in being alone in a house you reclaimed. You start to notice the small fidelities. Dishes washed without resentment, towels hung without witness, a light turned off because you remember, not because someone nagged. I learned that dignity is a quiet room you can sit in without company. Marissa and I still had the occasional flair. A schedule misread, a forgotten jacket, a comment that landed wrong and sparked. We put out the sparks without burning the furniture. Once, after she dropped the kids, she hung back. "Do you hate me?" she asked, and for the first time I realized the answer mattered to her more than the orders ever had. "No," I said. "I don't have the energy for hate." She nodded. "Me either." For a moment the old softness rose between us like steam. Then it thinned and the night took it. If betrayal always wore horns and a tail, you could spot it coming down the street and lock the door. Sometimes it shows up dressed as compassion with glittering eyes and a planner full of good deeds. Sometimes it hands you a baby that isn't yours and asks you to love it anyway. I didn't. Maybe that makes me small. Maybe it makes me exactly the size of the promise I made to 3 other lives. On the first warm Saturday in May, the kids and I planted tomatoes in the strip of dirt by the fence. The soil was stingy and smelled like last year. Nora named the seedlings after planets. Ivy painted popsicle sticks to mark their rows. Lucas dug without being asked. I pressed each fragile stem into place and covered it carefully, thumb firm, palm open. The house behind us was quiet, windows wide, a place that could be lived in. When the last plant stood up on its spindly courage, Nora squinted at it and asked, "Will they make fruit?" I wanted to say yes, wanted to promise the world. I said, "If we water and wait." She nodded like she understood everything. Maybe she did. Maybe we all did, finally.